Coming up, Daniel Jones finds his home in Minnesota. Meanwhile, the New York Football Giants prepare for the battle, such as it were with Dallas on Thanksgiving, and Joe Schoen heads to Colorado to check out a QB. We dive in next. Yes, my friends, it's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where you know that we are your host. Over here, Adam Armbrecht, over there, Andrew Makwitz. We're healthy, we're wealthy, we're wise, we're preparing for Thanksgiving, a little bit of turkey, gobble, gobble, et cetera, et cetera. But then also in the meantime, there's a lot of stuff happening for the New York Football Giants in spite of being the team that seems most likely to have the first overall pick in next year's draft, Andy.
You know, I thought you were going to do like stuffing instead of stuff going on. I thought like maybe you do like play on words on some sides, but you're all business right now. Adam, can I just say one thing very quick? Like, obviously, we're going to talk about the Giants playing on Thursday. Don't you wish that the Giants weren't playing on Thursday? Like, wouldn't it just be nicer? Like, while you're going to be focusing in because the game doesn't mean that much to the Giants, wouldn't it be better if they were just playing on Sunday and you could have a full slate of non-Giants content going on?
No, I'm fine with it. You know what I mean? When you've been broken like this by the New York Football Giants, you don't care about it. There's other years, right? Like, so there are the years when they are competitive or when something's really on the line and you go, I don't want to ignore family and significant others to watch this very important game. Instead, I have the luxury of saying, oh, I see the Giants are playing football. I see this game means nothing to anyone. So when someone says, oh, how do you feel about the Giants or what do you have going on this weekend? I can go ahead and cranberry it, having the NFL game on as well as talking with family. I did a nice job there working with the stuffing reference. I thought
you just say, no, honey, listen, the Giants aren't more important than hanging out with your family, right? Like exactly. That's the position. I suggest you throw that out early. Like, no, you can have it on the background. I don't need to be sitting down and watching it. Like, it's important that I get to talk to your crazy uncle again for the fourth time.
We talked about, obviously, some of the players sounding off. Malik Neighbors came back out and reiterated kind of where he stood and the comments that he made. He said he wouldn't back down from the overall sentiment, but did say I could have chose some different words there. He talked with Joe Schoen. He talked with Brian Dable. It's all good, and that'll continue to be something that grows here. One footnote is when they asked him, hey, as a rookie, do you feel like, this isn't really your place? He said, why shouldn't I be? I'm totally fine with that. He is one of the best players on the roster. Somebody needs to be vocal. It should be someone else. But guess what? If no one wants to step up, then the rookie is going to speak his mind as well. So we'll continue to talk about that over the remainder of this season. But first and foremost is non-Giants news in a way, because Daniel Jones, who we heard the second that the Giants released him, it was that, hey, there's going to be a lot of interested teams. He's going to get to pick his spot where he's going to want to go. Clears waivers, so obviously no, money being taken on here by another team around the NFL. The Raiders made a strong overture. Daniel Jones said, ooh, I don't think so. I've been dealing with a terrible franchise for 6 years. I'm not going to be a part of that. But he ends up landing with the Minnesota Vikings. And we were talking off podcast. This was the team. It was in the short list that were in the discussion. You thought that this would be the landing spot for him. I said, maybe San Francisco, because he got a lot of weapons there, a lot of talent there. But this is ideal for Daniel Jones, short and potentially long-term, for a number of reasons.
Yeah, Adam, I think when you heard the interest around the league, you weren't surprised because there's only a handful of quarterbacks that become available that have won a playoff game that cost nothing that you could add to your team immediately. Like, that doesn't grow on trees. It's almost why Russell Wilson had such an active market because of his unique contract situation before, where like it didn't cost the team anything that wanted to sign him because it was all offset money. That's why he made the rounds to the Giants. The Giants said, we can't guarantee you a starting pot. Went to Pittsburgh. They basically did give him the wink, wink, nod, nod. But Daniel Jones found himself in a very similar situation. I thought the Minnesota Vikings made the most sense because of the coaching, first and foremost. You've heard Kevin O'Connell talk extensively, like actually about Daniel Jones being like, that's a guy you can win with. Like, he needs to be in the best situation. And you've seen Kevin O'Connell be able to do this with people like Sam Darnold, who went through some terrible situations with the Jets and the Panthers, spent a year backing up Brock Purdy, and then all of a sudden you see a renaissance and a resurgence from someone like Sam Darnold. Could that happen for Daniel Jones? Potentially, probably. The other piece of it, Adam, is All he has to do is beat out Nick Mullins and Brett Rippon to immediately become the backup quarterback there. And so, like, he gets to be in a really good coaching system, immediately becomes the number 2, can learn behind a coach that has embraced him before, but also shown that he's done reclamation projects in the past. It was a no-brainer to me. I have a question for you, though. Are you surprised that he decided, I'm not going to prioritize starting to try to get my value back up on the market with a team like the Raiders, or to your point, the 49ers, if Brock Purdy's arm injury or shoulder injury is worse than originally thought?
Yeah, the part of it where I'm not surprised by it is I don't think this is about the short term necessarily for Daniel Jones. Now, the fact that Minnesota Vikings are in a great position, whether they're going to end up winning the division or taking that second or third wild card spot, because the NFC North is an absolute beast right now with those top 3 teams, that's fine. We'll see how that plays itself out. But I think so. There's an opportunity maybe that in the playoffs, if there was an injury, he can step in and showcase it. But the learning curve getting into a system, I think, is important here. So, not wanting to, I mean, the Raiders, let alone, because they may have said, hey, let's come in the door and put you underneath the fire immediately right now. I think having the time to get into a system, to acclimate to it, to take a little bit of step back, let the dust settle from some of the stink that has been attached to you from your time with the Giants organization overall right now. No, I'm not. I don't think the value, you mentioned even Sam Darnold in his time in San Francisco. I think there's more value to being around a good coaching staff, a good offensive mind, and resetting yourself as opposed to jumping into the water down the back end of the season to maybe set up your market next offseason, mostly because you've been on a bad team. And you can see how a poor team overall can make you look worse. We're not saying that Daniel Jones is really an all-pro and the Giants damaged him, but the Raiders, let's say the Carolina Panthers were interested. The Panthers, there'd be a laundry list of teams that would be interested in having him come and say, hey, maybe we'll give you some starts right now. And it could actually end up confirming suspicions by other teams around the league rather than this little bit of mystery. And worst case scenario, you could end up having the Minnesota Vikings send out to the league, Daniel Jones, good, smart, good in the film room, good on the practice field, right? Even if he doesn't see the field for Minnesota, he can improve what his PR optics are coming off of this Giants stint.
Yeah, the other thing about Daniel Jones picking the Vikings, and we were talking about this pre-show, is not only the opportunity this year, but the potential opportunity next year for Daniel Jones as well. Talk about getting some of his value back. But there is the idea that Sam Darnold is going to be a free agent, and he is going to be in line for a large Baker Mayfield type deal where it's going to make $30 or $40 million a year on a multi-year deal. It doesn't seem like the Vikings are going to be the ones to pay that unless things change and he wins a couple playoff games. They obviously went and drafted J.J. McCarthy, who went down with his knee injury. Adam, you mentioned it before, too. There's worse bridge quarterbacks than Daniel Jones in the NFL. And if he spends 6 months or 9 months or 12 months with Kevin O'Connell, and he basically hands the reins over to J.J. McCarthy, he can learn in a really good system, get better, get acclimated to a different scheme in the NFL, and still come out looking pretty good as he hands the keys over to the young rookie.
And it's funny, too, because both Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold have played 70-plus games in the NFL. Different for Sam Darnold, obviously, time with the Jets, then the stop, and now to Minnesota. When you go look at them, through their first 70 games, Daniel Jones, 64% completion percentage to Sam Darnold, 60.3. Daniel Jones has thrown for about 1,800 more yards through the air, similar on yards per pass play. Daniel Jones has more yards per game than Sam Darnold, even with everything that we're including. Now, taking away the last 7 games is effectively like this season for Sam Darnold. So we know those numbers are going to be bigger and more beautiful, but just trying to find a common spot to compare them at. 74 touchdowns to 59 interceptions for Sam Darnold, 70 to 46 for Daniel Jones. Like, if you are the Minnesota Vikings, to your point, here's a guy in Sam Darnold that we've gotten some value out of, but we have JJ, and our long-term is not going to be investing big dollars in that position. Maybe we can just run it back next year with Daniel Jones. And if you end up passing the baton off to JJ McCarthy, who was one of the younger quarterbacks coming off of injury, maybe Daniel Jones gets half a season. And it's not a demotion when he ends up going to the bench. It's because the rookie's ready to play, and then he sets himself up again for another potential, maybe larger payday, like what Sam Darnold is looking for, like Baker Mayfield looked for when he went to Tampa, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, in terms of Daniel Jones, this feels like a really good spot for him to sit, take a breather, learn, work under a great coach, have an opportunity to maybe be there not just this season, but next season. as opposed to going to a dysfunctional organization yet again, showing everyone that, yeah, he cannot thrive and be the player that everyone needs him to be in certain situations like that. I think this is great. You mentioned the 49ers. Last thing I'll say is with Brock Purdy's shoulder injury, that seemed like a good landing spot. I don't know if Kyle Shanahan's system necessarily makes a ton of sense for him, given that Brock Purdy throws with anticipation, and that's really what his system is built on. That's been a tough part for Daniel Jones. He's more holds the ball too long, uses his athleticism, doesn't seem to be the same thing, but who knows? Maybe Kyle Shanahan would teach that out of him. So I could have seen a lot of these different situations. Yeah, chicken or the egg. Does he hold the ball too long because he's been taught that, or is that just innate in him? I don't know. I'm happy for Daniel Jones. This will be one of the last times that we have to talk about him until inevitably Sam Darnold goes down at some point and Daniel Jones starts winning games for the Vikings, and we sit here and say, could this get any worse for us around the NFL?
And on the 49ers, I think it's injuries can make an opening for a player like Daniel Jones, but it also creates a pressure for Daniel Jones. And that's, I think, the difference here. If Darnold goes down, yes, then he could be there for it. But right now, there's no pressure. Come in, learn, give yourself a beat as you move towards the playoffs. And as you say, this may be the last time we mention him. And you said until he starts winning playoff games. I'm more thinking about maybe we'll look at next year's schedule, see where the crossovers line up, and then we get the head-to-head with Daniel Jones, by the way, being the bridge quarterback for a year in Minnesota ahead of J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback the Giants could have taken. All of the beautiful narratives are setting up just in a bad way for Big Blue. Now, though, let's also give a little footnote here. Before we talk about, originally we came in thinking there was a key IR decision here for the Giants that's worth talking about, and the way that Joe Schoen has operated across this past offseason and through this season. But Joe Schoen, along with assistant GM, who's getting a little bit of buzz here, and Brendan Brown, were in Colorado. They're watching Shedeur Sanders. He has had a big leap forward here in this college season by all accounts, not just from production on the field, but also the way they talk about him as being more of a leader now in the locker room and maybe being a prospect here. I have an answer to this question, but do you make a big deal about the fact that Joe Schoen and the both GM and assistant GM are out there scouting one of the top prospects at the QB position?
I mean, what is their job supposed to be? If you want to be here next year, you have to act like you're going to be here next year. If they were like, no, we're not going to scout anyone, they'd be like, well, we should get someone in here that will scout someone that is prepared for next season. So I'm sure you feel the same way as me. They're doing their due diligence. And also it's a 2-for-1, Adam, where you get to see Shedeur Sanders at quarterback. You also get to see Travis Hunter, who is also a natural wide receiver and cornerback, freak athlete that's potentially going to go in the top 5. You get to see 2 top 10 players at once. Obviously, you need to be doing your due diligence at this point. Now that you've released Daniel Jones, I don't think any of the quarterbacks that are on the roster are going to be here next year. So he should be flying to every single place. Should be flying to Miami. Should be flying to Texas. Should be flying to Georgia, Penn State, wherever he needs to go to see what the quarterback play is around the league. He needs to figure out what it looks like with all these other quarterbacks, and he needs to assume that he is going to be back here, or else what's the point of him being around for the rest of the year? He should get the Joe Douglas treatment at that point.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not like we're talking about even if Daniel Jones was still here and was still the quarterback, you'd still be doing this because you did it last year too. Hey, hi, everybody. They did the same thing last year with all the QB prospects as well. It's why we talked about and debated the J.J. McCarthy of it all. You heard about the Drake May, the trade-up attempts, the way that Brian Dable talked about every other quarterback that they couldn't get their hands on very fondly as opposed to Daniel Jones. So it's a part of the process. So I don't read anything into it other than that's what you're supposed to be doing with your job. And even if, by the way, even if you're probably getting fired, you're still going to go out and scout those guys because that's what it is. And it's not going to look good if you think you're getting picked up somewhere else to run an organization. If you're saying, yeah, well, they told me my goose is pretty much cooked here, so why bother, right? So you continue to go through it. We'll see how it pans out. And by the way, per NFL Draft Buzz, as of right now, just overall player rankings, Travis Hunter is listed number 1 overall with a 93.4 rating. You have Shedeur Sanders coming in at 3rd overall, 91.3, sandwiched between them. Ironically, and this is just prospect grades, it's not about where they're going to go in the draft. You have Genti out of Boise State, who's coming in 92.5, running back. And hey, number 2 overall. When has that ever not worked out for a franchise investing high draft capital in a running back? That being the case, when we think about this team and Joe Schoen and keeping an eye on what he's up to, shocking, Andy. that a player that has primarily had injuries every single year of his pro career and back to his college career ends up to be dealing with an injury. Azeez Ojulari, who we talked about, and in the offseason, and he was bullish that he was a player that needed to be traded, that would be traded. And I'm not even saying it as in, and look, Andy was wrong. Andy was right. They should have traded him. They didn't trade him, but that is what you should have done. Now, I'm curious if you think it still doesn't really matter, because in my opinion, if it was a 6th-round pick that was being offered, we don't have to sit here and say, oh, you should have got that 6th-round pick. He's just going to walk in the offseason. Maybe that'll be the case. I'm not going to be too aggressive on my criticism of that, but it serves as the microcosm for the bigger ones, the Xavier McKinneys, the Saquon Barkleys of the world. That's what this represents, the decisions of players that walked out for nothing, and that you're now going to move forward into an offseason and be talking about, well, maybe compensatory picks down the line, but we don't have more capital in here because we think we kept him because we were going to be competitive. Where are we living on this planet when we look at the record now for this team?
Oh, Adam, it's like you took the words out of my mouth.
I'm surprisingly gassed up. On a side note, are you surprised how gassed up I am about the Giants? They're 2-9. I mean, the season's over, but there's a lot happening here for me.
I know you came into this episode, I felt a little doom and gloom, and now all of a sudden you're excited to chat about all these decisions that are being made.
Thanksgiving. I do love Thanksgiving.
Well, so Adam, the thing that you mentioned about it is Ryan Dunleavy kind of intimated or reported, like, if they got a 6th-round pick, I would have taken it for Azeez Ojulari, but I'm not sure the organization would have felt the same way. AKA, sure, they were offered a 6th-round pick. They didn't take it. I would have taken it, is what he was saying. Not to put words in his mouth, but that's my conclusion from that. To your point, if they got a 6th-round pick, they should have taken it. And some people may say, well, why, Andy? Like, we have this compensatory pick that we could get if he walks as a free agent. People need to understand that the compensatory pick is also related to the people that you sign in the offseason, and they offset each other, Adam.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that the Giants will be active in the free agent market, then I understand saying, let's collect those compensation picks. Let's figure it out from there. The problem is the Giants are going to have cap space now that they don't have a quarterback making $50 million. Daniel Jones will still have a negative cap hit, but the Giants still have cash. They will need to spend it. They will presumably be bringing in a quarterback on a rookie deal. They will have money to bolster up this roster. By not trading Azeez Ojulari, you're wasting that 6th-round pick. And to your point, it just goes to the larger problem. It's like, if you know that Darius Slayton's not going to be here, if you know that Azeez Ojulari isn't going to be here, and you're getting offered 5th and 6th-round picks, take them, because we need to try either getting more capital to move up for guys that we really want, so we don't get snaked like we did this year by having to draft Tyler Nubin when the run on quarterbacks went. Or you look at Xavier McKinney, Saquon Barkley, as you mentioned before. If you knew they were not going to be here, trade them so you get more. You get those picks directly into your pocket. So for me, if the Giants make offseason moves, they have essentially let Azeez Ojulari walk out the door for nothing. And to me, at a larger scale, that is the problem that I have with not doing anything with Azeez. Plus, his stock was never going to be higher than what it was right before the trade deadline. He was healthy. He was contributing. You knew Kayvon Thibodeau was going to come back. Why not get value for a guy that inevitably was going to get injured again, just like we thought he would?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, man, you could have told me that they were going to trade Azeez Ojulari not for a 6th-round pick, but for a high-level special teams contributor who was, 23, 24 years old and has played in all 17 games since he came into the league. I would take any kind of value that you think can help build up what you want to do here. So there's a few different ways to slice the Azeez Ojulari pie. And it just, again, at a high level with Joe Schoen, feels like you come back to saying, yeah, and it just seems like you didn't make that choice. Or even maybe more importantly, I wonder if you'll agree with this, because we'll talk about the game coming up on Thanksgiving against Dallas. But on a very high level, like, I also go back and think whether or not the Hard Knocks tells us a lot about this, but did Joe Schoen, maybe it's like we talk about the decisions he made, but some of them kind of feel like he just didn't make a decision. Are you going to trade him or not? You're like, I don't know. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. And you just kind of allow all of these things to unfold until you don't do it. Are we going to come out and say, hey, Saquon Barkley, we're going to give you offer X? No, we'll see what the market does, and then we'll kind of slow play our way through it, right? Like, there's a lot of instances. Same thing maybe with Tyrod Taylor. I mean, you can go down the laundry list of Xavier McKinney, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things seem to come back to where Joe Schoen, if he has a vision in his head, one may not be the best vision. We're starting to come to grips with that a little bit, but also that the vision has led to what feels like a lack of decision making or a lack of influence or reaction to what's occurring. Does that make sense to you? You know what I mean? Like, it almost feels like he came in and said, the roster's going to be bad. We're going to have to make these decisions. And after the Daniel Jones choice to pay him, where you could see that almost immediately got a sample size of this has backfired on us, it became very hard for for Joe Schoen to say, all right, here we go. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to attack this roster. It kind of feels like he's just, taking 1,000 paper cuts, and it's the slow bleed. And maybe we know the writing on the wall that John Mara could be talking about by the end of the year.
But this is also going back to when we saw Hard Knocks, and the complaint that I had for Joe Schoen was not that he didn't get the guys that he wanted. It was that he misvalued every single free agent that he was talking about. He said, no one's paying Saquon Barkley that much. And his assistant scouts and coaches were like, Philadelphia might pay him that much. Like, Philadelphia might pay him 13 or 14 million. And they were spot on. So Joe Schoen missed that one. Oh, we'll just bring Tyrod Taylor back. Tyrod Taylor cost more than they thought. He was gone. Talk about a couple million more for Illuminor, a couple million more for John Runyon Jr. Like, every single person that he thought, he had misgauged the market. And again, is he misgauging the market on what Azeez Ojulari is going to be? And does he say, well, we could sign him on the cheap as a rotational third edge rusher, and then all of a sudden he signs a 3-year, $30 million deal somewhere else? And he's like, sure. Who could have saw this coming at him? Who could have saw that someone would give him a Godfather offer? And it's like, this happens every time to you, Joe. You gotta recalibrate what your evaluation is and how much people are worth in the open market. That, to me, is the part that I'm missing.
And ironically enough, now with the injury to Azeez Ojulari, it's, okay, maybe that market isn't going to be there for him. But are we going to be having the conversation if Joe Schoen is back as the GM, remains the GM for this team, that they go and they say, well, he's coming off the injury. He was productive. So maybe we get a little bit of a team-friendly deal for a player that we can't trust will be able to be healthy. And then we're sitting there in week 4 or 5 next season going, oh, remember we thought we had such a strength behind Burns and behind Thibodeau, but Azeez goes down again, and now we're thin in another position, right? I mean, like, you can almost, I know I can. I'm like, I can see it just slowly moving towards allocating X number of dollars, like you complained about very heavily with Drew Lock this offseason, and $5 million. So it's just $5 million. Is it just $5 million? Because if you keep misallocating funds 2 or 3 times across a roster, suddenly you add up to a big contributor. Suddenly you add up to a player that really does matter to a roster.
Right. If you add the money, and I saw Alex Smith talking about this on ESPN, he did the same thing. He's like, you may say $5 million is nothing. It was $5 million guaranteed. The guy can't even get on the field. He can't beat out the third string guy. So that was clearly a misallocation of funds. You gave Devin Singletary the money that you did, and he's started for a couple weeks. Now he's back up to Tyrone Tracy, who you drafted.
We never even, oh my God, sorry, keep going, but we almost glossed over the fact because of the value of getting a guy like Tyrone Tracy Jr. felt so good, but you still signed the veteran running back that you clearly illustrated in Hard Knocks. You don't value. These guys fall off a cliff at a certain age. By the way, this guy's a year and a half over that cliff, and we're going to sign him anyway. Like, there is a problem with that, even if you ended up finding a good pick in the draft.
And think about it. You have Devin Singletary making $6 million. You have Drew Lock making $5 million. That's $11 million. If you could trade Drew Lock and Devin Singletary and take on $2 million of extra cash for Saquon Barkley, every single team on the entire planet would do that. And that's just the mismanagement and the reallocation of funds. And that's just why some of these moves to me are just puzzling, where it's like, if you think Azeez,
by the way, $2.1 million for Azeez Ojulari in this season as well. If you were making different choices in the offseason, or you were proactive about maybe trading him, or whatever it was going to look like, you end up getting yourself a little bit further up the totem pole of where you want to spend money for players. And just real quick, now it's easy. And at the time we said it, we weren't going to sign Xavier McKinney, so that we can't be revisionist about what we would have done. But if you were having that conversation and it wasn't about Saquon, it was about your safety. Well, if I found $13 million on my roster, suddenly paying a big chunk doesn't look as bad if you can solve those positional needs through the draft or through veteran low-cost free agents, not $6 million, $5 million, boom, boom, boom. Now you're overspending at positions that don't offer real value.
And now here we sit with the Giants having no direction. We're moving on to this Turkey Bowl game against the Cowboys. It feels like a little bit of a rudderless ship, and everyone is becoming indifferent to the outcome of the game. And it's odd because we always like beating the Cowboys, but it would be way better for the Giants to lose this game than it would be to win a meaningless game with Drew Lock at quarterback. And this is kind of this is the conundrum that the front office and coaching staff has put every fan in, is like, Adam, as we turn our attention over to the game, talk to me a little bit about like what you want to see on Thursday as you're getting ready to carve into the Thanksgiving turkey.
Yeah, I don't, it's fascinating because you look over at Tankathon and Jacksonville is there right now with strengths of schedule because there's is sub 500. The Giants are second overall. Then it's Vegas, who's lost 7 in a row and doesn't look like it's trending in the direction of winning football games. So you have teams, New England, go look at schedules, could be a little bit different there. There's 3 teams right now in Carolina because they feel like maybe they still have something in Bryce Young, are going to stay competitive here. Maybe Tennessee, maybe New York, teams that could plummet towards the bottom, potentially the Jets, that is. So you want to look at it as, I always root for the team to win. You know how we do. The game starts, if they're playing well, I want them to win. My biggest thing is, this isn't really what I'm watching for per se. Coming off of a 30-7 loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I just find myself being like, you'd have to convince me really hard, really early in this game that this team is going to make me want to root for them to win tomorrow. Like, to show me something on the field that makes me want to root for you to win. Nothing that went on last week had me thinking, hey, if they win the game, they win the game. I always want to see that. Instead, they really did. They finally beat down. Andy's the same way in this regard. I wonder if you're on the same page with me this year. I am at the point where I'm like, you know what? Just lose the games. Why? Because I don't know if this is the right coach. And I don't know if it's the right GM. And I don't know if it's a lot of the right players. And actually, I'm a lot closer to no's than yeses on those guys. So if you're going to go out, I kind of want it to be the extreme. Either come out and blow up the Dallas Cowboys, win the game 35-7, take your combined offensive output over the last 9 years and put it into one game and score 35 points. And I go, hey, that does feel good. Hey, Brian Dable, right? Hey, Shane Bowen, even Joe Schoen with the players, etc. Great. Or get blown out 42-0 by a team that's in shambles in Dallas, because I just want to keep getting confirmation going one way or the other. And coming off of Germany and then coming off of last week, we are not far away from confirming whether it's lost the locker room, doesn't have the skill set, whatever it may be, that this is not going to be the regime to carry forward the rebuild.
It's very simple for me, Adam.
I'm on fire. I'll tell you right now.
I know. Listen to you. You are fired up for this game. It's very simple for me. My heart always wants, anytime the Giants take the field, to win the game. Football. It's that simple. But my head is telling me this is not a game that is worth anything other than instant gratification while having a glass of wine on the couch on Thanksgiving. You'll have instant regret the next day, and you'll sit here and say, why did we win that game? Did we just shoot ourselves in the foot from getting Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or Travis Hunter? And so I'm trying to eschew short-term gratification for longer-term excitement for the Giants to have a relevant franchise moving forward. So honestly, let's just tear this thing down to the studs. If you get embarrassed by the Cowboys on Thanksgiving in a spotlight game, it feels like there's no way that I think Brian Dable salvages the rest of the season as the Giants head coach. I definitely don't think that.
You think he could be fired in season? You think they'd fire him in season?
I think if it gets bad enough, they would, unless they've already had the understanding that, like, play Tim Boyle, Brian, see what you got in Tim Boyle, right? Or like, what does this guy off the street got that maybe, Nathan Rourke, what is he doing these days? Is he in construction? Bring him back onto the practice squad. Like, unless he has a full missive, the team is starting to show the cracks. The players are talking about how soft they're playing. It feels pretty indifferent. You have star players speaking out. If you get embarrassed in a primetime game against one of your bitter rivals, when like they are starting Cooper Rush as their backup quarterback and they have a bunch of injuries too, it feels like there's no excuses other than they're just not trying to win games anymore.
Yeah, and yes, that tends to be the case. It's hard for me to see an in-season firing, but again, you keep stacking up some ugliness. You said, to your point, another third really ugly loss in a row. Then at some point you just say, hey, let's get a look at Mike Kafka as the head coach. What do you think? Bottom line is, though, what's interesting about this, I will say, from a pure draft perspective, even though like you have Trevor Lawrence and you think that the Jaguars should be better, okay, they're bad and they've lost 4 straight games here. They're going to play Houston. Then they're going to have Tennessee. Then they go head to head against the Jets, 2 teams near the bottom. Then the Vegas Raiders, 2 teams near the bottom. So when you look at their schedule, you can see like how some of these teams are going to, someone's going to have to win those games no matter which way you slice it. For the Giants, Dallas, then home against the Saints. That's a team that could be plummeting, but they've looked better under the interim head coach there. Atlanta, the Colts, Philly. So, sorry, Baltimore will be after the Saints there as well. And they're good. So here's the only caveat I would give is the Giants could win this football game, and I'd like them to win it like looking good. And I don't mean that like they're capable. I mean that, there's a world in a world, and then still lose every game after that. You know what I mean? So there's maybe only one more kind of risk here on the schedule. And when you're only a 2-win team, how risky is it? Maybe the Saints, but they've been playing better football. So if you look at that schedule, you can say, if you want to give the organization, the fan base, a feel-good vibe, well, go ahead. Beat Dallas in Dallas on Thanksgiving. Everyone rejoice. And then you'll lose the rest of the games, and you'll be a 3-14 team. You'll still be near the bottom. Maybe the only concern there is when you're talking about the Dallas Cowboys and the fact that they're 4-7. They're not that far away from being near the top of the draft. They've got Dak Prescott, even with the massive contract, now with the injury. Yeah, they have Trey Lance, whatever. Like, there's things that could go on here where by beating Dallas, we could be talking in next year's draft, like we talked about with the Commanders, what position are you going to be in by beating a division opponent and getting the best options when it comes to the draft? So in the end, long story long, I hope the Giants lose tomorrow. I really do. Just because I don't want any excuses, and because I think we probably are pretty close to agreeing that head coach and potentially GM are going to be gone here after this season. And I'd like the next regime to have the best opportunity to make whatever choice they think is right for the team moving forward.
At the end of the day, you mentioned that the Giants played the Eagles in Philadelphia the last game of the season, Adam. What if Detroit wins out, Philadelphia wins out, and the Eagles have nothing to play for? They're locked into the 2 seed. What do? They bench people. All of a sudden, Drew Lock or Tim Boyle is auditioning for a job next year, and they mess around. They win a meaningless game. You can't win too many meaningless games and still get an impactful player in the draft in the top 5. So I just want the Giants to lose out, forget about this season, and be excited about what the future will look like, whether it is with Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll or with a whole new regime that gets to pick their quarterback and figure out what this team's going to look like for the next decade.
Yeah, and I really wonder if John Mara has the fortitude to see that out, because year over year, we said this before, the owner said it himself. He hates to lose. He feels responsible to the fan base when the team is bad. And sometimes, like last year with Tommy DeVito, you just want to give the fans something to be a little bit happy about. But this, I've mentioned this before. New York Rangers came out and did this a handful of years ago. Guys, we're about to be really bad, but it is for the ultimate goal of giving ourselves a chance to be better and to improve and to be championship level competitive. They don't have to say that out loud, but they can signal that through the remainder of this season, and then we'll see what happens with Abel. We'll see what happens with Shane. The Cowboys are laying 3.5 at home, by the way, so that's almost a neutral field. Andy, go ahead. Give your pick for tomorrow's best thing you'll eat. Who cares about the game? What is your number 1 overall pick for Thanksgiving?
Oh, great question. I mean, I'm a stuffing guy through and through. Stuffing to me is the best dish that you can have. It tastes great. It's fantastic. You only eat it basically at Thanksgiving. So for me, that's my pick. Adam, I know you're going to go some kind of like sweet potato yam. I is my guess. What do we got?
First of all, I personally make a delicious sweet potato side dish that is just thinly sliced, layered sweet potato with rosemary, a little bit of bourbon barrel aged maple syrup drizzled over top of that. You set it and forget it in the oven. We don't even need to get into that. I'm going to use cheat code and go it's the perfect bite. You get the mashed potato. The turkey's laying on top of it. You've dipped it into the gravy. The Ocean Spray canned cranberry sauce is right there with you. You want to put, if someone's doing it right, a little bit of the stuffing there. But that is, to me, is quintessential Thanksgiving, is the perfect bite. There's other holidays that are phenomenal, that have amazing food. But Thanksgiving is the only one where if you eat everything on your plate in perfect proportion, you literally are tasting Thanksgiving while you sit there drowning your sorrows or just celebrating with family. I'm not even going to go with the Giants. Just enjoy family, enjoy friends, enjoy the holiday. We'll be back in potentially on Friday. We're going to see how the game goes, okay? Disclaimer. We're going to see how it goes. If it's worth talking about, we'll come in, we'll break it down on Friday. And and hopefully everyone enjoys a happy and healthy holiday with you and yours. Any holiday sentiments, Andy, before we get out the door?
No, just, I mean, I know I'm going to sit down tomorrow and cheer for the Giants, even though I want them to lose. So I'm sure everyone's going to feel as conflicted as me. Stay awake, stay alive. Don't let the tryptophan get you too quickly or too early in the day. But happy holidays to all the OGP listeners out there.
You better believe it, guys. We'll be back again talking all things New York Football Giants over on YouTube, One Giant Podcast, on X, at Adam Arbrecht, at AMAC214. Get us on the podcast feeds. Please, please, please go subscribe wherever you get those taken care of for you. And as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.